It's 2 minutes after the hour. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Tableau Server and Tableau Cloud Admin Talk. My name is Mark Wu. My topic today is Tableau Cache. Cache. I will share with you the configurations to better leverage Tableau's cache features to meet different use cases, and also balance the Tableau workbook performance with a server CPU memory settings. What is cache? Cache stores the most recently used results, so it can be more quickly rendered later time without query the data source again. Cache is a common process in almost all the systems. Tableau cache always happens, like it or not. When people click a view on the server, it creates a cache. When people run a subscription on the server, it creates a cache. Not only cache the query result, but also cache the image as well. Even when people run the API on the server, it creates a cache. Always happens. And cache happens at all levels. At the data source query level, no matter it's for a live connection data source or for extracts data source. Also for render tile cache, that is image, especially for the fixed size image. And also, of course, happens at the browser level, no matter which browser. That is also called client-side cache. For the browser side, we probably all know that if you create a private browser, or if you use Mac, press the Shift and the reload, it pretty much take care of the cache, remove the cache, remove the client-side cache. On the render tile cache of Tableau dashboard, pretty much you don't have much control. There's almost nothing to configure either. But the more control we have is on the server data query side cache. This is where the main topic today. The rest conversation is mainly around data query cache. By the way, if you have any questions when presenting, you can click the QA button and ask your questions over there. And also, this is a community event. Everyone can also chime in, try to answer your questions. I'll try to stop a few times try to answer some of your quick questions along the presentation. At the end, I'll leave more time for QA. The biggest fact for the server cache policy setting is that there is only one single cache setting for the whole server, a single cache policy for the whole server, like it or not. That is actually true for both Tableau servers and Tableau Cloud. The situation is that for live connection workbooks, they deserve short cache, where for the extracts ones, longer cache is always a push and a pull. How to balance those? By default, if you're using Tableau Cloud, it's 12 hours cache setting and not customizable. At least I'm not aware of how to customize. Let me know if you know how. If you are running your own Tableau server, by default, if you have not done anything around your cache configure for your own server, by default, your server has cache and reuse as long as possible. Means cache the data as long as your server memory can hold. It's equivalent as the TSM data access caching set as low. Depends on your use case or your major use case on your server. If most of your connections on your server are live connections, I would strongly recommend you change the default configuration for cache to always. Means always gets the latest data. Pretty much it means no cache. I mean live connection. You really don't need a cache. But this is not a common use case. Very common use case of a server is have a mixed live connection with extracts. That's most common. Which is why the 12-hour setting of Tableau Cloud is as default. Now, for server, Mark's recommendation, if you're running your server and likely you have both mixed live and extracts, I also recommend you set longer cache policy, 12 to 24 hours long. My server has 24 hours cache setting. Plus, use the default cache warm-up feature. That is a pre-compute after extracts refresh. What it means is the following settings. 1, TSM data access caching set to at least 720 minutes. At least. Again, mine is 1,440 minutes. That's 24 hours. Second, by default, every single site on your server has pre-compute recently viewed workbooks. Is checked. Leave that as checked. What it does is that it refresh your cache automatically after each extract's refresh completion. Again, it recalculates your cache, your data query cache, after data is refreshed. That is a beautiful feature. It does take additional Tableau server memory CPUs, which I'll come to that later on. Okay, but there is a way you can control how much to do with this area. So this is number 2 setting. Keep default. Number 1 is change it either to 12 to 24 hours. Now, if you look, this is good for extracts only. Those 2 settings are good, very good for extracts only, but no good for live connection. If you keep these settings, people have live connections. They will complain to you saying, I need my data, my workbook to have less cache, to have a shorter cache. How do you deal with that? In the past, I had to come up with crazy idea, workaround, but now good news is Tableau came up with a feature. For live connection workbooks, it's a 21.3 feature where each workbook owner is able to set workbook-level data refreshness policy. I'll show you later. Think about that. If you don't know this feature yet, each workbook owner can change their specific workbook cache policy. only for that particular workbook. Now, if you say, yeah, this looks good for live connection workbooks, and for the most extracts, when I had this, also there is one team came to me. They are using extracts, but their data refreshed a lot more often. They want much shorter cache for their workbooks, which I couldn't do in the past. Now there is also very good news. This is the latest 21.1 feature. Although the server-wide has one policy, but for a specific workbook using extracts, only using extracts, there is a view acceleration feature that workbook owner is able to decide, refresh the cache for this particular view only, or for the more specifically is refresh the cache, the data cache, query cache for the view this particular view is using. Think about that. That actually covered almost all the thin errors in your real life. I will double click on each of this, but have this picture in your mind. This is strongly recommended feature for your server cache setting. I'll double click on each of this. Number one, for the cache setting, set the value 12 hours or 24 hours, knowing it's for the whole server, not site specific. Tableau Cloud, similar setting, but 12 hours as default. Mark's recommendation, 12 to 24 hours. This setting, not only for all the sites, but also for all the workbooks, no matter it's live or extracts. But there are two exceptions. Anyone knows which type of workbooks are accepted or do not follow this cache setting? One is rule-level security workbooks. By design, they don't follow. Second one is, of course, I just mentioned, for the live connection workbooks, if the owner has data freshness policy on a particular workbook, they can overwrite the server setting for the particular workbook. The second setting, pre-compute query cache after extracts refresh or cache warm-up. It actually only warms up for the most frequently used dashboards only, not for all the workbooks using extracts. Be aware, only the frequently used workbooks. What do you mean the frequently used workbooks? Well, the definition for the frequently used workbooks in the context of number of extracts. By default, if the views of the workbook in the last 7 days, let's say is 14 times viewed last 7 days, and let's say this workbook has a daily refresh, the next 7 days has a 7 refresh scheduled, last 7 days had viewed 14 times, and then this workbook is qualified as more frequently used workbooks. Tableau server will automatically refresh the cache this workbook used. That is the definition of frequently used. It's a careful balance between the workbook performance and the CPU memory consumption on the server. The threshold number 2 is a default, but can be configured. On my server, I configure it at 1.4. So how do you implement that? You just you just let it go default. You don't do anything. So basically, enable it by default. It is enabled already, and you can be configured, the threshold, but you don't have to by default. Two most likely is good. And if you are serious, like me, you want to go back to observe and adjust, how do you do so? I have a workbook published. Take a screenshot. You can go to my blog site. It'll lead you to another blog which you can download the workbook. This workbook actually will show you where your setting should be. It'll guide you, not show you, it'll guide you. For me, I follow the 80-20 rule. 80-20 means I want my 20% workbooks to have, we talk about all the extracts workbooks. I want my 20% of my extracts workbooks to have cache warm up after extracts refresh. And hopefully those 20% of workbooks have the 80% of the usage on the server. 20-80, that's my setting, roughly as a guidance. If you download this workbook, plug in with your data, you will roughly see where you are. Assuming average, most of the extracts are daily refresh. Talk about live connection. Number 3 is live connection. I showed this is a thing that used to be a challenge with 21.3 feature. For live connection, only live. This is a true live connection, not the extract connecting live on the server. Where if you go to the workbook, the I information, you will find the data refreshness policy. You can set this policy many different ways. This is a beautiful feature for live connection. Okay, you will see the data refresh. You can set many different features, whatever way you want. This can only be done by owners for the particular workbook, one by one only, and this is for live connection workbooks only. I'll show you again. When you click the workbook, if you don't see those options, means they are either you are not owner of the workbook, or the workbook is not a true live connection. How about extracts? Number 4, the view acceleration feature, brand new feature, 22.1. Tableau calls it a view acceleration. Actually, it's a cache warm-up. It's the same as the cache warm-up as the extract refresh cache warm-up. However, the pre-compute, the flag setting at the site level, the number 2 setting we just talked about, applies to all the more frequently used workbooks. But this feature is for particular workbook can be controlled by owner and can only be controlled by owner. You can select one view or you can select multiple views and enable them. Since this is a brand new feature, let's dive into a little bit more. What are the differences? Again, I spent quite a lot of time. I try to summarize together for you. What are differences between the view acceleration versus the pre-compute query cache after extracts? What's the difference between those two? Who controls them? The cache warm-up or pre-compute is admin. We control it. But the view acceleration is the owner. How triggered? Both are triggered by the extracts refresh. Yes, the view acceleration is also triggered. It only be triggered by the extracts refresh completion. Pre-compute is for extracts workbook only, same as the view acceleration. Rule level security is closed by the pre-compute. Well, for the view acceleration, I have not verified, but this is what documentation says. It actually works. It also has cache for the rule-level security workbook, but only for the thumbnail generation user only, one user only. When you publish a workbook, you choose this particular user as a thumbnail generation, and you have a view acceleration, it will create cache only for this user. Think about that. It's not very useful, at least in my opinion, not super useful, but it's a feature. Is it for all frequently used workbooks? For pre-compute, yes, but view acceleration is chosen workbook. What if the workbook is rendered very fast already? It will be exploded if you try the view acceleration feature. It says this workbook is already at the best performance. You cannot do it. You cannot accelerate it anymore. But the pre-compute doesn't care. As long as qualified as frequently used, it will cache again. What about refresh very, very often, too often? Well, for the pre-compute, too often refresh is in the context of usage. The threshold setting 2, remember? For the view acceleration, if the extract refresh has 6 or more times a day, you cannot set it. What if the owner is inactive? Pre-compute doesn't care, but the view acceleration, you cannot do it anymore. What if the password embedded expired? Nothing can be refreshed. What if the extracts failed? Nothing can be refreshed. What settings if your server-side admin can do? Well, for the pre-compute, you do have option at the site level, even at server level, enable it or not. For the new view acceleration, as a site admin, we have 2 settings. One is we can set a limit how many views per site can have this feature. How many views per site you allow to have this feature. Second one is you can have a blacklist. You can have a blacklist for certain workbook for whatever reasons. You don't want to see the cache warm up. You can block it from the view acceleration feature. All right, this is a recap. The difference between those two. Let me just quickly to see if there any questions. Let me see. I can answer any quick questions. There was one question at Victor. Okay, I think this question answered already. What's default if I don't do anything on the server? That's a cache as long as possible. I mentioned earlier. Yes, this recording will be shared. Thank you. All right, let me test your understanding. I went through very quick. I went through relatively quick. Let me test your understanding, okay, of the cache features. With data access cache setting, the 2 types of workbooks do not follow. Which types? Anyone remembers? Which types? One is rule-level security, by design, no cache. The second one is a data refresh policy workbook, if the owner set different policy for the workbook. Question number 2. I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's say your server has cache setting as 12 hours. The workbook has no rule level security. 7 a.m. view accessed by a user. 8 a.m. extracts refreshed successfully. At 9 a.m. user John clicks the view. Will John get the changed data? Will John get the changed data 1 hour after extracts refreshed? The server has 12 hours cache policy. The answer is maybe. Depends on if your site disabled or unchecked the pre-compute workbook flash or not. If unchecked, for sure, John will be getting the old data. Question number 3. Let's say your site is using default with the pre-compute workbook flag checked. For the same scenario, will John get the latest changed data? The answer is still maybe. Depends on if the workbook is considered by server as frequently used or not. Remember, frequently used only applies to this flag. The frequency definition is last 7 days number of views divided by next 7 days number of extracts scheduled 2. Question number 4. Let's say this workbook is the frequently used one. Will John get the latest data at 9 a.m.? Well, it's still maybe. It's why cache is confusing. It's not sure. Maybe. The answer still maybe. This is where when you get questions from your users, it's possible the user's browser may have a cache. Reload or reload again will confirm that. Number 5 question. Now, we know that earlier we talked about frequently used workbooks. Likely, John will be getting latest data, changed data, likely. Okay, assuming there's no browser cache. But less frequent, unfortunately, John will not get the latest changed data after extracts refresh. What if you have use cases? Probably you will, like me. You have critical workbooks for executives, not used very often, but wants to get latest data always. What do you do? Well, please do not go back to change the cache policy to 1 hour. No, please do not go back to 1 hour policy. Tell them use one of those 2 options. If it's live connection, leveraging the feature 21.3, set data refreshness policy at a particular workbook. If it's extracts, follow the view acceleration feature. That's your answer. Think about that. That's your answer. As a recap, now Tableau actually gave us a bunch of different tools we can play. At the server level, set a cache. Recommend set long cache, 12 or 24 hours. By default, select the pre-compute recently viewed workbooks. It will cache warm up all the frequently used workbooks, hopefully 80-20 rule. There's a third thing we did not talk that by default is enabled. At server level, when you run subscriptions, it creates an image when another person subscribe, it can leverage that image cache. By default is on. If you don't do anything, it's on. Leveraging the cache for image as well. At the workbook level, there are 4 different cache kind of behaviors you can do. One is rule level security workbooks. By default, it's no cache. The another one is data acceleration feature. Even for less frequently used workbooks, user can choose, owners can choose to have a cache warm up for the particular workbook or view. Number 6 is also controlled by the end users more often, where deal with either browser level cache, all kind of cache. If they don't see a data change, how to deal with that? They can force a refresh. They can always force a refresh by either reload, that's simple enough, or click the shift and reload for Safari or Mac, or type in refresh equal to yes, likely will refresh the data. And the last one is for live connection. They can set workbook level policy. Let me answer a few other quick questions before I talk about the memory CPU setting on the server. Just mine. Sorry, I may miss the information for rule level security workbook. How does the cache works? For rule level security workbooks, there's no cache. Tableau server does not cache that because the user specific. It'll be too much for Tableau server to save the cache for each user because each user's data is different. By design, no cache for rule level security workbooks. If workbook has rule level security, no matter what, is a member of whatever, none of the discussions applies. You are right. Thank you. Confirm this again. Just me, John. Yeah, you saw that already. Praveen. Hi there. On the 152 core server, with 80 cores are configured for running these. How many cache processes are recommended? How many cache servers recommended? The question is how many cache servers recommended? I don't know. I have a lot more cores than you. I think each node, with core server, each node, I have either between 2 and 4 cache servers. The best way is you try it. Try 2 to see on each vScore node to see if there is a memory issue on your server. If no, you can increase to 3 or 4. The good thing about that is I believe this can be changed dynamically. Try it out, Praveen. I don't have a good answer. Maybe others can chime in. Can we have a copy of this PowerPoint for self-starter? Yes. After this talk, next few days, I'll post a community recording. I'll write up a summary. I'll attach these slides. I know there's a lot of things for maybe for you to digest. Let me dive into CPU memory controls with a cache setting as long 12 to 24 hours. Okay, my server has 24 hours. How do you make sure your CPU memory is still under control? How do you balance between the workbook performance and the CPU memory? There are a few settings I want to share with you. One is, for me, this is something everyone should do if you have your own server. The vScore server query limit by default is 30 minutes. That's way too long. On my server, I'm using 3 minutes. What this will do is it will kill any long, not well-designed workbooks. Avoid one badly designed workbook can potentially bring the whole server down. With this setting, actually, some of the out-of-box admin views cannot render on my server, but I live with that to make sure my server is healthy. This setting applies to everyone on the server, every single workbook. Everyone should have this setting, 30 minutes. 30 minutes is way too long. Who will wait for 30 minutes for dashboard result? Nobody. Second is a memory setting. It's a vSCORE process memory setting. By default, it restarts, reclaim by itself, reclaim at 80% memory, and restart 95% of memory. The problem I see is the restart too late. I changed this setting, let reclaim at 60% before damage is made. So that's my recommended setting for this vSCORE process memory. The command to use is this. I don't know if this documented or not, but I've been using this for last couple of years. Works very well. Also, I gave you calculation how what's the right value, depends on the host memories and how many vSCORE servers do you have on your host. Yeah, this is an undocumented server feature, but it works very well. This setting also applies to the hyper process. If you have a server management add-on, like what I have, if you have server management add-on and also have a standalone hyper set node, and the setting at the number 2 above, the vSCORE process memory, will also apply to this hyper memory, and that can be a problem. The good news is there's a separate setting that will make the hyper memory setting differently. You want that to be differently. This is also undocumented, but this works perfectly as well. I've been running this setting for the last maybe 3 years. Now, number 4, this also is my life savior. I think this came out maybe 2+ years back. Is a hyper level, session level memory setting. A session level, not the whole host level, is a per session. Per session, can we set memory limit? Yes, you can. Again, this is also avoid one badly designed workbooks that can take much larger memory that can bring your whole server down. Yes, it happened to me. There were some bad design workbooks with such large volume data. One section have 100 gig memory that causing problems for my server. Later I figured out there is such a setting I can set a limit. I recommend 5 to 10 gig. I think I set as 10 gig on my server. So what happens is when you have this hyper means the access query, when you have this session level memory, what happens if any workbook, the owners may not know. They have bad design or the volume is too big, the query is not well designed. When they come to this scenario, they'll get these errors like this. Exceeding allocation limit, blah, blah, blah. They'll get this error message. So this is a setting, which is beautiful. This is a beautiful setting. Again, recap. If you don't, there are a lot of things, but just those are 4 things to remember. Recap. For common server with mixed extracts and life, recommend setting 12 to 24 hours with a cache warm up checked. This is repeat of what we just talked about. The setting TSM and pre-compute checked by default it is. Left connection, tell your workbook owners they can change it by themselves with extracts for special workbook, they can select view accessories. Of course, row level security, nothing applies, pretty much. That is everything actually I have for today. Let me just answer whatever questions you may have. Go into the QA. Hongding, can we have a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, I will post where you can find it. Okay, I'll share with you where you can find it. Okay, you can find it from YouTube, but I think the best way you can find this is later on. If you go to my blog site, enterprisetableau.com, a bit slow coming. Enterprisetableau.com, that is my blog site. Later on, probably 2-3 days later, maybe after this weekend, you can always find my blogs. I have a lot of blogs. You can always find the server admin tag link. If you click this link, this is a short link, always there. If you click this link, it goes to Tableau community server tag. It has all the last couple of years previous recordings here. Okay, and you will find this recording here. Plus, you will find my write-up and my slides here. You will next few days. Answer to number of cache process. There's another link. Thank you for providing this info, Michael. Cannot data be refreshed when if the user hits refresh button when they are looking at data? Yeah, if user clicks the refresh button, likely they will get the latest data. Likely. Yes, you are right. Question from John Clark. Does a hyper session memory setting require server management add-on? I believe so. The hyper memory setting. I'll go back. Hyper memory setting. Although I don't know for sure for this one. I think so. I don't know for sure. You try it. If you don't have server management add-on, try to see if it works. See what tells you. John, good question. I think so, because this is more like for I don't know for sure. Hopefully not. Curry, thank you so much for this presentation. We have badly designed workbooks. You're not alone. Quick off server information will be getting greatly. Yes, I know that. I face that. Yeah. Vinayak, limitations provided are very helpful for us admins to effective governance. Thank you. Does limits this setting for with query cache limit? I'm not quite sure. Will it affect any other configurations? Is back to Tableau software. You ask a lot of questions. I don't know. Which limitation I talk about? Limiting setting to the with query limit. I think you talk about this setting. With query limit 3 seconds. 3 minutes. I recommend, right? With query setting. If you're asking this one, with query setting does affect any other configurations? I don't think so. This is only for end-to-end. The with query session set at 3 minutes. I do not think it applies to any others. Victor talks about with query settings. Tableau saying that it should match number of cache servers. But recently asked again, they're saying doesn't need to. Yeah, depends on who you ask. Try to figure out your own setting. And the good thing is those settings are dynamic, can be changed. Yeah. Any other questions, anyone? I did not have a chance to go to the chat. I know good chatting help each other. Again, this is community events. All right, one more question came to the QA. You want to see my server? I'm sorry, I cannot share with you my server settings, but I gave you the settings. This is the settings I have. Topology, I don't think I can show with you. Sorry. Roman. Is a memory limit 10 gig for hypermemory? Yes, that's a limit is for hyper 10 gig. Let me show you what we talk about here. This setting, the 10 gig is for extract query memory. Again, this one, the 10 gig recommendation setting is called hyper section memory, is the extract query memory. I call hyper because it happens on the hyper node. It is all the data queries against extracts. How much memory do you allow maximally for per session is for that purpose. By default, no limit. I recommend 10 gig or 5 gig. So you can time out the better design workbooks. Scott, we have external Tableau server for external customers. What we suggest for the cache setting, the server is refreshed daily and nightly. For external of internal server, my recommendation is pretty much all the same. Those are 4 settings I have. Strongly recommend long cache, 24 hours, and have the cache warm up. For special use cases, live extracts, they can do workbook-level settings. Scott, this will cover. This will cover. Yeah, this will cover that. Roman, does a one house or several house? Roman's question is around a standalone hyper nodes. Is it one or multiple? I think I have one. Praveen has another question. Are there any unlicensed processors in the newer Tableau server 22.1 so that we can isolate the process like repository? Are there any unlicensed processors? Unlicensed processors, I'm not quite sure. You want to isolate the processes like a repo. Maybe others can help answer this. Unlicensed, certain nodes you want to, yeah, looks like you are on a core license. You want to leverage that more. I'm not quite sure the answer, Praveen. Any other final questions? If not, this will conclude the presentation today. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.